In the mountains of Athos, the bell of Xylopotamos rang for the last time. Not for prayer, but for warning. 37 women had taken refuge behind these walls. Brides fleeing forced marriages, widows hiding from Ottoman patrols, daughters running from the fate the empire reserved for the conquered. On this morning, April 3rd, 1430, the bell didn't save them. It announced the end. The Janissaries did not come in rage. They came with intention. The Aga carried no sword in his hand, only a sealed order. Every woman inside the monastery was to be taken alive. No blood, no bodies, just silence. The empire didn't want martyrs. It wanted ghosts. They gathered inside the chapel, the only place still sacred. Some were daughters of stonemasons. Some were newlyweds, whose husbands died defending Thessaloniki. Some were pregnant. All of them prayed for a miracle. But the empire that surrounded them did not believe in miracles. When the gates broke, the walls of Athos shook, not from force, but from fear. The women were dragged from the chapel, not beaten, not cut, but separated. That was the strategy. To break a soul, you start by breaking the world around it. For 2 days they were marched across the ridges of Athos. No chains, no ropes. Just the quiet pressure of men with orders. Some women tried to run. None escaped. Because the Janissaries did not need to kill them. They only needed to deliver them. They were not taken to the city, not to a harem, not to a slave market. Instead, the Janissaries delivered them to Myriophyto, a secluded fortress the Ottomans used for a purpose that never appeared in chronicles. A place where names were removed, where identities were rewritten, where a woman could live, but never return. The first step was not violence. It was paperwork. Names were crossed out. New ones were assigned, Turkish, Persian, or invented entirely. To the empire, a woman without a past was easier to control than a woman with a story. And for the brides of Athos, their stories ended here. The place they were taken first was called the Silk Room, a name that sounded gentle, but carried a purpose far darker. Here, the brides of Athos were stripped of the garments that connected them to their past. Dresses sewn for weddings, veils embroidered with hope. In exchange, they received identical beige robes. Not one woman looked like herself anymore. The Ottomans knew exactly what they were doing. When everyone looks the same, memories begin to blur. Some women whispered prayers under their breath. Others sat in silence, trying to hold on to the last pieces of who they once were. And all the while, the silk curtains swayed softly, as if waiting for their identities to fall away. The first night inside Myriophyto was not loud. It was suffocatingly quiet. The brides were lined along the stone corridor, given thin bedding that barely softened the floor. No one shouted. No one threatened them. A single janissary simply stood at the far end, a silent reminder that every breath was being watched. Some women cried quietly until exhaustion claimed them. Others stayed awake, afraid that sleep meant surrender. The empire didn't need violence to break spirits. All it needed was a night without comfort, a night where fear grew slowly, patiently, inside the silence.
The next morning, instruction began. An Ottoman tutor, calm, precise, unreadable, stood before the brides and demanded they repeat Turkish words. Language was the empire's cleanest tool. Change a woman's vocabulary and soon her memories begin changing too. Theodora, Maria, and the others repeated each phrase with trembling lips, not because they wanted to learn, but because refusal might draw attention. The room smelled of dust and old plaster, the benches worn by countless unknown women. For the brides of Athos, every repeated word felt like a thread being cut. One more piece of their past, quietly slipping away. Days later, the women were taken to the Hall of Mirrors, a long chamber meant to confront them with who they were becoming. Bronze mirrors lined the walls, polished to cruel perfection. The brides stood before their reflections wearing Ottoman robes chosen for them. Not violent garments, but foreign ones. Some turned away instantly, unable to face the stranger in the mirror. Others stared at themselves, searching for something familiar, a gesture, a shadow, anything. But the Empire understood something terrible. If you change how someone looks, eventually you change how they think. And in this room, many women felt their past slipping further from reach. Not everyone surrendered quietly. One bride, Theodora, refused to accept the new name assigned to her. The official offered her the scroll with practiced indifference, but she stepped back, shaking her head. Theotokos was the name her mother gave her, and she would not trade it for one chosen by the Empire. The room froze. Every bride felt the danger in the air. The Ottoman officer didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded to his guards. 2 janissaries approached, taking Theodora by the arms. Her fate had been decided. Women who resisted too strongly were sent below, to the chambers few ever returned from. The stairs to the lower chambers spiraled deep into the mountain, each step colder than the last. Theodora descended between 2 guards, her breath echoing in the narrow space. The torches flickered, throwing distorted shadows across the stone. She wasn't being dragged, and somehow that calmness frightened her more. A place that punishes openly reveals mercy. A place that punishes quietly has none. With every step downward, the world she knew, her father, the sea, the bells of Athos, grew fainter. Here in the depths, the Empire forged compliance not with pain, but with isolation. The room she was placed in was known as the Silent Room, not officially, but by those who guarded it. It was barely wider than her outstretched arms, lit only by a narrow sliver of daylight high above. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed faint scratches on the stone walls. Crosses, initials, fragments of names carved by women who came before her. Each mark was a message. I was here. I mattered. Theodora pressed her fingertip to one of the crosses, feeling the depth of someone else's fear and stubborn hope. The Empire wanted silence, but this room still whispered. The next morning, Theodora found a broken pottery shard near the corner of the cell. It was small, sharp, and, to her, priceless. She pressed it to the wall and carved a simple cross beside the others. The scratch was not deep, but it was hers, a reminder that she had not surrendered her name, her faith, or her memory. To the Ottomans, it was an act of defiance. To her, it was survival. Her cross joined dozens carved before it, a silent choir of women who fought not with swords, but with the refusal to disappear. While Theodora remained below, the brides above continued their days in quiet patterns. They sewed, cleaned, learned new words, and waited for instructions that never explained their fate. Some whispered theories that they would be married off, traded, or sent east. Others believed they were being prepared for something far worse. But the truth was simpler and darker. The Empire didn't need to decide their future. It only needed time for them to forget they had one. In the dark of the Silent Room, Theodora carved a second cross, deeper than the first, more deliberate. Every stroke of the shard steadied her breathing, anchoring her to memories the Empire wanted erased. She whispered her own name again and again, as if afraid it might slip from her mind. In this place, identity was not taken violently. It faded softly, like dust drifting in a quiet beam of light. And the only defense was to carve each memory into stone before it vanished. One evening, footsteps echoed outside the chamber. Theodora braced herself, expecting guards, punishment, or silence. But instead, an older man knelt by the cell door. He slid a small piece of bread and a candle through the bars. No words, no explanation. Just a fleeting moment of stolen mercy. Some said certain officials in Myriophyto pitied the brides, though they lacked the power to save them. Others believed kindness only prolonged the suffering. But to Theodora, that single candle was enough to remind her that light still existed, even in a place built to extinguish it. Up above, one of the brides, Maria, collapsed during lessons. Her body simply gave out, as if her spirit had dissolved faster than her strength. The tutor stepped back, whispering for the guards. The brides lifted Maria gently, holding her as if handling something fragile. She wasn't ill. She wasn't wounded. She was simply empty. The Empire's methods were slow, subtle, and devastating. For some, the breaking point came quickly. For others, it arrived like a long-awaited whisper. Maria's collapse reminded every woman watching that these walls didn't just contain them, they consumed them. That night, Theodora lit the candle left by the old man. Its faint flame illuminated every carved cross, each one a story of someone who refused to vanish. The light flickered, shrinking the darkness that had grown inside her. Here, beneath the fortress, the women who came before had left behind a map of their resistance, a constellation of scratches across cold stone. For Theodora, the candle was not a rescue. It was a reminder. Even in the Empire's darkest chambers, hope could survive in the shape of a trembling flame. On her fourth day below, Theodora noticed something strange. A faint breath of cold air seeping through a crack in the wall. She pressed her hand against it. The stone was damp, trembling slightly with the pulse of the world outside. Someone had tried to widen it long ago. Marks of chipped rock formed a pattern hidden beneath dust. It wasn't an escape route, not yet. But for the first time since she arrived, she felt the possibility of movement, of direction, of a future beyond this darkness. A place built to erase identity had failed to erase imagination. The crack in the wall led to a small adjoining chamber, and when Theodora stepped inside, her candle revealed something astonishing. Every wall was covered with carvings. Crosses, initials, full Greek names written with desperate, shaking hands. This wasn't a prison. It was a graveyard of forgotten identities. Women from decades past had left the only legacy they were allowed, a mark in stone that said, "I lived." Some names were repeated again and again, as if the writer feared the Empire might scrape them away. Theodora touched the carvings gently, feeling the weight of every story that history tried to bury. Years passed. Regimes changed. Wars came and went. And Myriophyto, a place built to erase, was eventually abandoned and allowed to fall into ruin. The walls crumbled, the roofs buckled, and the chambers below filled with dust and silence. No record of the brides remained in official archives. Their stories were swallowed by time, their names crossed out in ledgers, their fates left unspoken. But the stones kept their secrets. They remembered every footstep, every whispered prayer, every cross carved by trembling hands. In 2011, archaeologists exploring the ruins found a sealed passage beneath Myriophyto. What they uncovered stunned the team. A hidden chapel, untouched by sunlight for centuries, its walls covered floor to ceiling with crosses and Greek inscriptions. The air was thick with dust and history. Every carving told a story of women who refused to disappear completely. The archaeologists realized they had found not just a chamber, but a memorial carved by the forgotten, preserved by the darkness that once imprisoned them. At the far end of the chapel, one carving stood apart, a phrase etched deeper and straighter than the rest. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. No one knows which woman carved it. No one knows if she ever escaped Myriophyto, or if this inscription was her final act of defiance. But her words survived the empire, the centuries, the silence, and today they stand as proof that even the forgotten leave an echo, if they refuse to let the darkness claim them.